Akira Tsubaki is a normal student, although a little bit of a loner. One day a strange new transfer student arrives named Mikoto Urobe, and she quickly becomes known as the weirdo of the class due to her odd habit of sleeping throughout class as well as her strange outbursts of laughter during the class which creeps out her classmates. One day when Urobe has fallen asleep at her desk at the end of the school day, a curious Tsubaki goes to wake her up. But when looking at her face, he finds himself entranced and ends up trying some of her spit. This causes him to have a strange dream where he can't get Urobe out of his head, and at home he comes down with a terrible fever. Meanwhile, Urobe hears about this and goes to his house, and she manages to give him more of her spit which ends up curing his fever. She explains to him that his fever is a symptom of withdrawal, because after tasting her spit he will become sick if he doesn't get more of it. This creates a situation where every day Urobe starts to meet up with Tsubaki to give him more so that he doesn't get sick again. Of course, due to such personal contact between the two, Tsubaki ends up starting to have feelings for Urobe, and it only takes him a few days before he confesses his love to her. Urobe is unimpressed with his dedication, however, and asks that he truly impress her by confessing in a way that is unique to himself. Tsubaki quickly shows how dedicated he is to her by taking a special photo of his former crush from his wallet and ripping it up in front of her. A suitably impressed Urobe agrees to become his girlfriend, and she tells him that the reason why she laughed strangely in class is because a voice in her head told her that Tsubaki would be the first person she would be with. Now in a relationship with the mysterious Urobe, Tsubaki decides to go to his friend Kohei Ueno for advice. He wants to progress his relationship with Urobe, but because he has very little experience in relationships, nothing he does works. Although he gets advice from his friend, Ueno doesn't give great advice and nothing works with Urobe. Eventually, a frustrated Tsubaki confronts Urobe and asks if they really are in a relationship. In response, she tells him to close his eyes, and after removing some clothes she gives him some of her spit and tells him that it has special powers that will help them know what they are feeling. An uncertain Tsubaki accepts this explanation, and later that night Tsubaki has another dream about Urobe. Surprisingly, after his dream, Urobe takes some of his spit and is able to tell him about his dream in great detail, proving there is some connection between them. One day Tsubaki sees his friend Kohei kissing his girlfriend Ayako Oka. This shocks Tsubaki because he thought his friend was single, but Kohei reveals that he and Ayako had actually been dating in secret. Inspired by his friend, Tsubaki wonders if he can kiss Urobe, and the next they meet he asks if he can kiss her. Instead, however, Urobe insists on giving him some of her spit in a test tube and tells him to drink it before bed instead. And when Tsubaki does what she says, he ends up dreaming that night of an accidental kiss by Urobe. But in the dream he is also disappointed because the kiss is accidental. This ends up making him think about his dream the next morning, and deciding that he and Urobe should only kiss when they are ready, and they shouldn't rush things. Meanwhile, another boy in their class named Ogata confesses to Urobe and asks her to go out with him. But before Tsubaki can protest, Urobe stops him and tells him not to interfere as she will handle it. The next day Urobe approaches Ogata and gives him some of her spit, but when he tells her that he doesn't feel different she quickly rejects him. Meanwhile, she does the same to Tsubaki, who has an intense reaction, and she takes this as proof that she and Tsubaki are meant to be together. They end up walking home together holding hands, signifying their deepening bond. One day Ayako approaches Urobe at lunch, which surprises the rest of the class because Urobe is kind of a loner weirdo, and Ayako is quite popular. Later, when Urobe gets an injury during their gym class, Ayako takes her to the nurse's office to get help. The two girls end up sharing a drink, and suddenly Ayako finds herself getting the same injury as the one Urobe got in gym class. They determine that since they shared a drink, they might have created an accidental bond with each other similar to Urobe and Tsubaki, but instead Urobe's injuries get transferred to Ayako. Ayako becomes interested in finding out more about Urobe's special properties, but when she asks if they can become friends, Urobe instead rejects her. The next day, Ayako ends up giving some spit to Urobe and teases her that she clearly hasn't kissed Tsubaki yet. This somehow reduces the tensions between the two of them, and they end up having lunch together at school from now on. A few days later, Tsubaki is disappointed he doesn't get to see Urobe in a swimsuit during their gym class. Somehow his disappointment changes into him imagining an image of her instead. Then as summer vacation starts, the two of them decide to keep seeing each other and exchanging spit. While the summer progresses, Tsubaki decides to ask Urobe out on a formal date to the beach, which she accepts. At the beach, Urobe quickly tans and the two of them have fun eating and swimming. The two of them end up closer because of their time together, and Urobe feels some of Tsubaki's embarrassment on the way home because of their special bond. While shopping for clothes, Tsubaki runs into Ayako, who talks to him about using first names with her boyfriend, Kohei. Ayako realizes that Urobe and Tsubaki don't use each other's first names through a brief spit swap with Tsubaki. She then confronts Urobe and talks to her about first names for a bit before Urobe excuses herself. At the park, Tsubaki finds a sleeping Urobe and whispers her first name, Mikoto, to her. Tsubaki has another strange dream and blurts out that he wants a photo of Urabe while they are walking to school. Later, Tsubaki is waiting for Urabe at a bridge when his old crush, Aika Hayakawa, invites him for coffee. After he turns her down, Tsubaki finds Urabe hiding at one end of the bridge and says she didn't want to interrupt their conversation. As they walk back, Urabe and Tsubaki talk about Tsubaki's crush. After another spit swap, they understand each other's feelings, and Tsubaki pulls out the camera again to take a picture of Urabe, who lets him take one with her tongue sticking out. After showing great skill on the track, Urabe is asked to join a relay race for the sports festival. However, she turns down the idea of joining the track team because it would mean she couldn't walk home with Tsubaki. When the students switch to their winter uniforms, Tsubaki catches a cold. Ayako tells Urabe how she wore a bikini to help Kohei get over a cold, so Urabe secretly puts on a bikini under her coat and gives Tsubaki some of her spit, which helps him get better. On the day of the sports festival, Urabe helps her team win the relay race. Tsubaki suggests that Urabe should join the track team, but Urabe refuses again because she prefers spending time with Tsubaki. One day Tsubaki gets another strange dream where ends up extremely close to Urabe's chest. When he wakes up, he can't get the dream out of his mind, so he decides to walk in the direction Urabe usually goes home, and ends up finding out where she lives. Since Tsubaki is already nearby, Urabe decides to invite him inside for a drink where Tsubaki still can't get the dream of him and Urabe out of his head. Later, when Urabe accidentally trips in her apartment, Tsubaki reaches out to touch her, but she ends up stopping him for acting too forward. An embarrassed Tsubaki tells her about his dream, and she gives him some of her spit, which helps him to understand the dream better. Afterwards, she allows Tsubaki to get close to her, but when he starts to tease her ears, he notices that she is starting to cry and he quickly leaves because he is making her upset. The next day, as Urabe tries to sort out her new feelings while talking with Ayako, Tsubaki asks her to slap him for his misbehavior as he apologizes for the day before. After the apology, Urabe resolves things with Tsubaki and ends up taking his injury for herself. A few days later, they all notice that Urabe has really messy hair when she wakes up too late for school, so Ayako decides to give her a new hairstyle. Urabe quickly gets a lot of attention for her new look, which makes Tsubaki a little jealous. On their way home, Tsubaki convinces Urabe to go back to her old hairstyle, and messes up her hair as she asks. The next day, when Ayako mentions it, Urabe shows her how it feels to have her hair messed up, and Ayako ends up liking it. Meanwhile, Tsubaki gets annoyed when one of the male students starts selling photos of Urabe's new hairstyle. He then learns about an idol named Momoko Imai, who looks a lot like Urabe. Tsubaki impulsively buys Momoko's photo book, and enjoys looking at it. When Urabe hears about it from Ayako, who heard it from Kohei, she demands that Tsubaki bring the book to her and cuts it up with her scissors, saying he doesn't need to admire an idol who looks like her. One day, Tsubaki bumps into one of his classmates, Aika, who has just been dumped by her boyfriend. She reveals that she knew about Tsubaki's feelings for her when he lies about not having a girlfriend. Aika offers Tsubaki the chance to try some of her spit, but he refuses, realizing it could harm his relationship with Urabe, revealing that he does have a girlfriend. The next day, Aika approaches Urabe and invites her to her school's culture festival on Sunday, hinting that Tsubaki might be there. Later that night, Aika tricks Tsubaki into meeting her by faking an injury on her face, and persuades him to go to the festival with her, pretending to be her boyfriend. Tsubaki tries to come up with an excuse for Urabe, but she soon learns the truth from Ayako. On Sunday, as Tsubaki goes to the festival, Aika arrives wearing her old school uniform. Meanwhile at the festival, Ayako is going with Kohei, so she quickly spots Tsubaki with Aika and she decides to spy on them. Tsubaki is trying to remain respectful of Aika, but is struggling with pretending to be her boyfriend as she keeps flirting with him. Suddenly, Urabe appears in a mascot costume and tells them they should do a blind taste test using her and Aika's spit to determine which one Tsubaki prefers. Immediately after Urabe's spit, Tsubaki has an intense reaction because Urabe isn't wearing anything underneath her mascot costume. This panics Aika, who attempts to give Tsubaki her spit, but she starts crying instead and breaks down because all of this was just a rebound for her, and she isn't able to get over her old boyfriend. Urabe comforts the other girl and tells her that she'll find the right girl someday. Meanwhile, Tsubaki, who has been blindfolded, accidentally sees the two girls together and gets slaps from both of them. As the festival draws to a close, Tsubaki and Urabe leave together, and she assures him that they will eventually have their first kiss together. After their time in the festival, Tsubaki is a little shy around Urabe because of what happened. The next day, when Urabe uses her scissors to stop Tsubaki from hugging her, she is surprised to see she has cut his forehead a little. She takes him to her home to treat the injury and notices her scissors are less accurate. She thinks this might be because of a strange dream she had after tasting Tsubaki's spit. When Urabe gives Tsubaki more of her spit, he starts picturing her and ends up hitting his head while trying to resist the urge to hug her. After he explains why, Urabe decides to hug Tsubaki herself, which restores her scissor skills. The next day, Ryako Sawano, a classmate, offers to change Tsubaki's gauze, but he chooses to keep the one Urabe gave him. Later that day, Urabe initiates another hug. One day while they are out shopping, Urabe runs into Tsubaki's sister, Yauko, who takes her to a coffee shop. There, Yauko talks about her past crushes and asks Urabe if she has a boyfriend. Yauko mentions she promised her late mother to take care of Tsubaki until he finishes his studies, so she doesn't have time for romances. Later, Urabe asks Tsubaki to visit his mother's grave next Sunday to pay their respects. When they meet, Tsubaki is surprised to see Urabe dressed very formally. After paying their respects and talking about Tsubaki's mother, Urabe wants to feel Tsubaki's memories of her. They exchange spit while Urabe touches the gravestone. Both Urabe and Tsubaki end up shedding tears and feel their bond has deepened, as they walk away, talking and laughing. And this is all for this video. Make sure to subscribe if you enjoyed it, and I will see you in the next one.